You are now tapped into the soft power frequency.
Welcome. This is season 3, episode 3 of Tapped In, our weekly live show about unraveling and remembering and the life that comes after. I am your co-host, Siobhan Diores of the Soft Power Collective. I'm a doula, a mystic, and a mother here with my lovely co-host, Dr. Kiki. And this week we're talking about spirit babies. As y'all heard last week, we haven't been getting too deep into planning beforehand, and it's been a fun creative process to see what topics emerge in that 24 hours leading up. And spirit babies was one of the first things on my mind this morning, and we received a few affirmations since. And so we're going to be getting into it all about how we use that term, about the pro-life versus pro-choice dichotomy, and what we have to say in our experiences as two people who have been pregnant before, have interacted with our spirits in different ways, and have connected with other spirit babies in the process of being doulas and working mystics. I'm going to pass it to Kiki.
Hey y'all, it's Dr. Kiki. I'm here as one of our co-hosts for season 3 of Tapped In, and so excited to dig into this conversation. I am a sound healer, I am a mystic, I am a neighborhood witch as well, and a full spectrum doula, and just love to talk about all things pregnancy, birth, and how that also is connected to the voice as someone who has spent a lot of years studying about the voice, and just in recent years realizing this very crucial and important connection between the voice and the pelvic floor. And of course, that came through as I was pregnant with my first child, my daughter, who was born in November 2022. And that is how I connected with Siobhan for the first time, mainly, was hiring Siobhan as my virtual birth doula because of our shared Filipino Celtic roots. I knew that I wanted and needed somebody like Siobhan with their experience, with their background, to support me through this time that I knew was going to be really important in my healing and just my life story because of my background as a transracial adoptee. And then as we connected more, started sharing more about our lives, we realized there's so many threads that have brought us together. And that's part of the reason why it's so exciting to be on this show with Siobhan, because we can get into a lot of different things and share from our own lived experiences, how we stand on things, how we see things, our perspectives, and spirit babies is definitely one of them. So excited to dig into it today.
I'm really excited for this topic, but before we go any further, I want to shout out that we are now on Spotify, thanks to Dr. Kiki doing some editing. And so season 3, episode 1, along with a few selections from season 2, are now available on Spotify. So inviting y'all, if you're a fan of the show, to show some love by, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, but also following us on Spotify, Tapped In with Soft Power, leaving us a 5-star review if you feel called, because we are really looking to grow. Part of our commitment here, as you've seen since season 1, when Midori and I were co-hosting, is that our commitment is really to share and document publicly our journeys, coming live from the trenches. And it seems like it started with that we were really more deeper in the trenches early 2023 when we started. Actually, 2022 is when we started live streaming. And lately things are shifting. I think it's really been cool to see the ways that we're not really in the trenches anymore. And that is kind of the goal, the way that we've been like leveling out on the most of the intensity of the spiritual healing and reclamation journey. I don't know about you, but for me, it felt like a fight. It felt like a lot of what I'm seeing now was there was a lot of creativity happening, but a lot of that was coming from this place of like adrenaline, and I got to get through this, and I got to grab these peers that I found to get through it together. And we were just kind of like marching our way through this journey. And we've reached this point that is a lot more peaceful and reflective. And so I think being able to kind of synthesize and process and integrate some of these experiences together here on this show is already proving to be super healing for me just in like the first few episodes.
Oh, absolutely. That was the word that came to me right away was that integration part, because I think when you're going through it, in the last couple of years, I've relocated from Arizona to Illinois. I got married. I had my first baby. There was just so many things going on while also having this vision of starting my own online business and collaborating with other like-minded folks, and really on the search for my people and other folks who are aligning with the same kinds of things I'm interested in, around healing and using our voices and using creativity as a form of resistance these days versus really hard power, aggressive activism, which is where I started and got very burnt out. And as you were saying, now it feels like, okay, we've gone through those experiences and now we have a chance to come to y'all and share what has been going on, what we've been experiencing from a place of not sharing from our wounds, but letting some of those wounds kind of heal, put that balm on there, and give us some time for us to really come from a really grounded place and more integrated place overall.
Mm, yeah, can we just like walk that memory lane real quick? Because I think I've been framing a lot of things especially in the last 3 years. And I wonder what that would be just like astrologically. May need to tap in with our producer and co-founder Midori on what was happening in early 2021 that kind of shifted all of this. Because when I look, I mean, that year we talked about this last week. You went to Hawaii for 7 weeks to spend with your family, really reconnected with your dad. You got married that same year, and that fall is when you hired me with intentions to get pregnant and grow your family. And really, and I'm getting like just chills right now because it only clicked for me when we came back from Hawaii in April that was also the 3-year anniversary of my abortion, which was a giant catalyst in my spiritual initiation and my like spiritual understanding of the world. And I think as there've been all these little ways I never really identified as somebody that was like always spiritual. And I feel like we've gotten into this before, and I'd love to hear more around like what that was like for you growing up in the church with a pastor parent. But maybe that's a whole other episode to get all together. But one thing that I think it's hard for me to orient myself, because in 2021 was kind of like that veil just fully getting ripped off to where I understood, and I had like these moments. And in fact, right before the retreat in December, where we met together for the first time in person, my ex-husband dropped off this bag of things that he was like, I found your stuff. And in there was a journal from when I was 17. And reading that and seeing how spiritually I kind of like saw the world and was speaking is so hard for me to understand, because I literally look back and I'm like, what was I experiencing at the time, now being like so steeped in kind of like the animism, the mysticism of the day-to-day, talking directly to spirit, to my ancestors. It's so interesting to think like, what did I think that I was receiving? But I was receiving these messages. And so like part of this conversation around spirit babies that I wanted to get into also is kind of like the psychic initiation that can come with pregnancy, with our intuition. And so, yeah, just really looking back on that year as, like I said, not really connecting yet that when I was going through that, That was when we both met in the Your Story Medicine kind of business mentorship group led by June McKay. And I remember the whole thing, like, your story medicine, what is your story? What is your story? And I remember I was always blocked, like in these coaching, one-on-one coaching sessions, I was so blocked. And like, she'd be asking, like, what do you want for yourself? What do you see about your life? And I couldn't see anything. Was outside of service to others. That's really how I was orienting myself at the time, which kind of reflects where I was at in that journey too. But I couldn't see it because my story was being written like in real time at that moment. So I would love to hear just like what was your understanding around spirit babies like prior to, I guess, that year, or when did it kind of start that you felt this connection with your spirit baby emerging, and how is that kind of in line with how you saw yourself as like a medium, as someone with psychic abilities?
Yeah. So I had never heard of the term spirit baby until I was starting to experience a real communication and connection with my own spirit baby. So I'll start there. There was really nothing that was in my mind or in my awareness that was shaping or molding how I was experiencing it. Um, Prior to 2021, though, even having a pastor as a mom, growing up and being in the Christian church growing up and being involved, and I wouldn't say I ever fully identified as a Christian, but I was involved and active in the church. Um, I still was also having these moments, maybe, not regularly, but once every 10 years, every 5 years, where I would go see a psychic and have a reading. That was
Mm.
also very much part of my growing up in childhood was, I think I had my first psychic reading when I was 11 or 12.
I did not know that.
Mhm. There is this place called Waniwak in Wisconsin, not too far from where I grew up, that it's like a camp where you can go. There's cabins and psychics, mediums in all of these cabins, and you go and you say what kind of reading you want, and you schedule your appointment, whether it's an individual or a group reading. And so I told my mom and my godmother, who helped raise me, that I really wanted a reading. So they're like, okay, let's go. So
Hold on. That is incredible. Just like the setup of that.
yeah, yeah.
Goals.
We'll have to go sometime.
Yeah,
When we
like,
go to
that's straight
Wisconsin.
up goals right there.
Yeah. So at that point, I was already receiving messages that I was going to have children, that my grandmother, who had already transitioned, was a guide for me, that she would come to me through butterflies, which I didn't know was a Filipino thing already at that point, but her and I already had like built this connection while she was earthside around butterflies and the meaning around that. And so that's kind of what I remember from that reading. I actually what was so funny about that reading is that the psychic dropped us in through prayer, but I never heard an amen because I was used to that in the Christian church. So I thought the whole time I was like in prayer pose, like I was looking down. I didn't make a lot of eye contact with her. And the whole reading just happened as I was just kind of like receiving in this prayer pose. So I thought that was funny when I was younger that I really sat through that whole thing, like praying. But so that was my first psychic reading, and I had already had those messages about having children someday. So once 2020 rolled around, I got really into my healing journey, and started meditating regularly. And then it was the beginning of 2021 when I was just in meditation and had this overwhelming experience where I just knew who I was communicating with was not an ancestor. It wasn't a deity. It wasn't, any kind of spirit that I had thought I had connected with prior. It was something new, and I felt it in my core that it was my child because they were telling me about their father and about the life that they wanted to live. And that was I just remember sitting there sobbing on my living room floor and like laid out on the ground, just feeling so much energy flow through me, because at the time I was still very new in my reunion with my dad. And that was a lot of what I was kind of piecing together in that moment, was that shift in myself that allowed me to reunite with my dad was what also was the catalyst for me to be open to starting my own family, because I was healing those wounds that I was feeling from my childhood around what kind of father I had, or would I ever meet him? And a lot of those questions had been answered. So the spirit baby that I connected with, that I believe is my daughter today, was just sharing with me how much that meant to her, and the relationship, just really affirming the relationship I was in with my partner at that time, my fiance, soon to be husband, and just saying like, yeah, he's my father, and I'm really grateful that he gets to be my dad.
Mm. This just like knowing your daughter, knowing your husband, it just really, really gives me chills, and also still amazed at how much more I can learn about you, even though it seems like we're like constantly in conversation around that stuff. So, for those who don't know, our doula journey was meeting for about an hour every month for about 18 months. And so, getting to connect with your spirit baby really changed my perspective as a doula as well. I think that first time was memorable for both of us when I was just like, do you know this song? And you being like, I sing her that song all the time. And like, again, I'm getting chills because I could just hear that song over and over during this energy work session, this journey into the birth realm. And yeah, it's just really what something you were saying about like the work you were doing as in your adoptee and decolonizing journey, really opening that door. I really think that that's kind of what was going down with me when I said I couldn't like see what that timeline was, like being dropped into things that was like, what do you see at the end of your life when you look back, and being like, it was all very basic stuff, and it was good stuff, it was sweet stuff, but it was just, like, so different from now, and something that I'm really, really starting to believe as somebody, who has really never been able to visualize my future until the last couple years. I think it just really is a testament to how, I guess, not off track, because I was on track. I did get there, but the way that I see things a lot is kind of just like this video game of like pipes, and like I don't know what the game is called, but I could see this kind of thing where you have to like turn and angle things so that things will flow through. And that's how I really see my life and my choices. And a lot of times, like I make a choice and then it kind of connects this pipe for things to flow. And at that time in early 2021, I did not have the understanding of even just like the own like power I had in my life and my decisions. Even though, like you said, I was really more wrapped up in that activist way of thinking, like became a doula because of the political reasons. That's what drove me into being a doula, not the spiritual stuff at all. And that was like part of my journey, was kind of like seeing the radicalness in being an openly spiritual person, whereas again, more conversations for more episodes, but being like politically left, or I don't really know what to call it, whatever we are, whatever we fall under, it's probably like the far left. um yeah, even just having, I really had to unpack that judgment too of what that meant to bring spirit into that political sphere. And so now we have like such a deeper understanding. Now we fully get why that is. And of course, like that is one of our topics we talk a lot about in our birth spaces and conversations, is like that it is inherently political. Um, but those doors opening because of the choices we make and that power we like take back over our lives, like of course then some little spirit would be like, okay, this chick that takes like control of her circumstances, that goes out and gets things, that is willing to birth the way that she wants without approval from those around them, like that's who I want as my mom. And it's just so like I really just get chills thinking about it, because it's just so special, like to see the way that that works. And so, I guess going from there, I don't know, I'm like, how do I even one thing I wanna just say, I guess before we get into the topic of my abortion is, like, I just hope that people listening who have kind of assigned it either way, and that's kinda what I came out learning was, like, most of the discourse is, if you're pregnant, it's a baby, there's a spirit there, um, and they need to be born versus it's just a clump of cells, it doesn't matter, um, it's not a baby, and really my experience falling, like, somewhere very, like, still, like, in the middle, yeah, just inviting people of any view. I don't think we would have many anti-choice, pro-life people listening. I think it would be the other side of people who are like, "Why are you involving spirituality?" And that's what scares me is to bring in sometimes the topic of spirit into something that is so politically charged because of the legislation against our rights, because of the forced birthing and under education of how sex even works, like, that does scare me, and the internet that lacks nuance sometimes because, um, it's hard to talk about the sacredness of things without the nuance that there's also choice and complexity. So, I don't know, like, what were the things you heard about or thought about abortion, I guess, in relation to that prior?
Mm. That is such a thank you for setting it up in that way and, not setting it up with any, expectations for where this conversation is gonna go. Because I think that's part of it is that I'm just plugging in my computer also, by the way. I got notification I'm low. That this is really sensitive because, from my understanding, you can have spirit babies come through that never actually come earthside, and that they can be incredible guides and support that transition of your life, just as powerfully, just remaining from a spiritual realm as they do if they do come earthside and all of the in between, right? Because any birth, there's no guarantees. And so you can be completely pro-life and go through with a pregnancy that still ends in tragedy or in death or in not having a child come earthside due to the many, many complications that can happen throughout a pregnancy. And I think that was something that, as becoming a certified doula, going through pregnancy myself, there was no point in my pregnancy where I just, was guaranteed a healthy baby at the end of it, just because there's so many things that can happen. And so, just with that broader understanding that, yeah, there are things that I can be intentional around and I can be um, informed about. And also, I have to just be open to what unfolds. And I think that is probably the biggest lesson that I got from pregnancy and becoming a mother is that I don't have control over everything. And that lessening of a grip of control and feeling like that I am God, is probably the biggest lesson is, live your life in flow and learn from the lessons and the ways that your life moves, because that's really what you're here to do, not to predict and to choose anything. Like, there's a lot that just happens to you, and it's about your choice in response to those things.
Mm, beautifully put. And I can only imagine the struggle for a Leo fourth house stellium to not play God when it comes to this, just like being this like expression of that. And it's hard. Yeah, there's like first and foremost like the choice and the sovereignty in it, and then there's just like the limitations of the limitations of spirit to move through material. And I think when I think of like the like framework that has developed through birth work and through the last few years of um, having my own experiences, working with clients, working with my spirits, and then definitely through mentorship with Caitlin Grania, who has helped me kind of expand into this spirit science, spiritism. Really seeing like yeah, spirit moves through material to achieve things to some degree, the material of our minds, of our bodies, of, that's why we have like the water and all these things. It's symbolic, but also provides a material function for things to move through. And sometimes the material world, especially with all of the toxins, all of the disruptions, it just, it can't guarantee us anything. And I think exactly like you said, like part of that spiritual lesson is releasing control and how do we move with our circumstances and just recognizing that this is like one of the most like heart-wrenching ones, the most intimate ones, and one of the ones that is most silence for something that happens all the time. So I guess with that, I'll go into that kind of abortion conversation because if I'm going back 3 years to 2021, where I was at that time was being a mother to a 18-month old, about whatever age your daughter is now. That was about the age that my son was, oops, at that time. And I actually wanted to be pregnant. I, at that time, was married. I was struggling with like in my marriage, but honestly there was always this struggle in that relationship, and so it didn't really feel like, I can look back now, hindsight's 2020, of like you like I didn't think it was going to fix anything, that was for sure. But I knew that's what I wanted for myself and that I felt this. And when I look back at both my pregnancies and that partner, like you said, life is so much more complex. Like your baby told you, like, that's my dad. And I know for sure that like my ex-husband is always was meant to be the father of my kids. And um, so 2021, I had, and this is just kind of like the dramatic, everything that happens in my life tends to come in big dramatic tidal waves. Because when I got pregnant with my first child, it was like, got pregnant, lost my job the next day, moved back to California from Florida, got married the same year. Like all of that happened at once. And so 2021 was like, me confronting my spouse around just being concerned about his mental health coming out of the pandemic because he was an essential worker, um, really under resourced, and me not being able to kind of make up for that, but trying. And also, my doula business was kind of taking off. I've been attending births with my PTO while working 9 to 5 in healthcare, which again, adrenaline when I look back because I'm like, what was it didn't feel like it was doing too much at the time. It was like, I gotta like do these things for me. And I'm really glad I did. But I had finally got the courage to leave my job after conversations with my husband around being supportive of that. And so I left. April 1st was my first. It's so funny, these parallels, because April 1st, I remember, was my first day fully self employed. And I think I found out I was pregnant within like 2 weeks, which, like I said, matching to my 2018 birth story, was finding out I was pregnant and the very next day losing my job. So there's something around spirit clearing my time to tend to these things, because um, the thing that was so, I guess, that made it such an initiation was that I actually never considered that I would have an abortion before that. It was kind of this thing that I would joke and be like, well, I'm too old for that. I am, I already have a kid. I'm married. Like, I got to take responsibility for my choice. And obviously, that was very, not how I came out of that, because how I first responded when I did it, I told everyone in my life because it didn't even occur to me to keep it a secret that I was pregnant. And I remember being at a family, like my friend's family party with all my like young, like childhood friends, and then being like, how are you doing? And me just kind of like blurting out like, well, I'm pregnant. And everyone just being like waiting for me to like say like how I felt. And they're like, congratulations. And I'm just like, and like hearing them like celebrate it really made it sink in. And I was like in real time processing, like at this barbecue, just like, I don't actually know how I feel about this. And really, that kind of posing me with, for the first time, the consideration that I didn't have to do this. Me as somebody who, again, Cancer sun, very like mother identity. I grew up thinking I wanted like 4 or 5 children my whole life. I grew up really identifying with motherhood. I've been an auntie since I was like 7 years old and like loved that. I worked with kids, like just very like mom coded, obviously, as folks know, being on here. But really being like, wow, like this was the first time, and I don't know if I even remember the whole process I went through, but it was definitely around feeling like this is the first time where I can do something, but I get to choose, and it made it more complicated because I told my family and friends already I was pregnant. So if I were to terminate, everyone would know. Yes, when I decided to do that, one, my partner, when I told him I was pregnant, didn't talk to me for a couple weeks, like was just so shut down by the stress of it that he didn't speak to me barely, and like would come home and I would be like crying every day. And now I understand trauma and I really like have a lot of compassion for his reaction, but it was him like being like, "You still crying? Like, are you aren't you done crying yet?" Because I was just like in a mess about this identity crisis because my so much of my identity was about being a mother. Um, and so with that isolation, with the love of my friends, with having a starting to kind of, at the same time going through this business program, showing up. I was not really doing the work of the program, but I was just showing up to the calls. And I remember some days I would just show up and just like immediately start crying. And I think I showed up on the call one day and was just like, I'm pregnant, y'all, and I don't think I want to be. And just kind of like crumbling there in front of a group of like, at the time, strangers. And all of that kind of culminating in this choice that was like, I get to choose something for myself. And that was when I finally told myself I was allowed to do it. And this is something I've seen so many times in my life of my own like decision making process as someone who's like very rebellious is like the second I allow myself to see that it's okay, like the second I allowed myself to believe like if you walk away from your family forever, that you can do that. That was also the second that I recommitted to my family because I no one was forcing me anymore. And so it was kind of like the second I allowed myself to believe that this abortion was okay, um, was when I really came into closer connection with the spirit of this baby and could hear him and could really like talk to him. And this was probably a year following my first like very clear connection with my one of my ancestral guides. And so just hearing and trusting that like that I wasn't also like making it up to rationalize for myself because that was something else I was worried about, like am I just like making shit up to like make it okay. And I've always been someone so open about people's choices. I never ever would have judged somebody else in my position, but I was being so hard on myself and really kind of exposing my own biases, exposing my own, like, martyrdom kind of, my, like, penchant for martyrdom. Um, and yeah, and then I remember really the choice coming down to being I could if I have this baby, I need to leave my husband. If I keep this pregnancy, I need to go move in with my mom. I'm gonna do that because I know I can't do both, and then choosing to then terminate the pregnancy so that I could continue to like pour into my husband, which, as y'all know, didn't really didn't really work out. Um, and the I don't have regrets on that, but I'm gonna pause in the story because there was a lot that came after in terms of the spirit baby, but yeah, just really hearing this little voice being like, "It's totally your choice, mom." Like that was what I heard was like, "It's totally up to you, mom. Like you don't have to do this if it's like gonna kill you. Like you have my brother to take care of." And like seeing this child who is so full of life, um, it was really hard because I think part of what complicated it was conversations about spirit babies that I had heard before. And this fear, because psychics had always seen me with two little boys close in age, part of it was this like really, and I still kind of am working through this fear that because I did that, that that was my last shot. Like, everyone's always seen me with 2 spirit babies, so if I don't have this baby, I'm never gonna have another one. There's no other, like, spirits lined up for me. Um, that was my chance to be a mom of 2, and even this Mother's Day, I was really sitting with that. That was just like, yeah, I'm a mom of 2 in so many ways. Like, like, connect with this baby, I dream. I have several dreams where I have 2 children, and I could see his face, I know what he looks like. My son has said his name, like, just playing, and it's just really trippy and expansive, and then, adds in the layers of complication when it comes to the ways that people talk about it culturally, and I always have this urge where I'm just like, "You're so freaking wrong, like, you're so wrong about what you're saying, like, you don't even know." Um, but also still kind of, again, checking my own, like, growth areas that I'm like, I still didn't this saying this right now, like, feels like a big stretch to, like, actually say that, and not in a reactionary way, because sometimes I wanna be reactionary online about it, like, "You like, I'm so s," and then I get to, like, "I'm so sorry someone made y'all feel this way," because everybody is speaking about it in the same kind of fear, but I also I don't know, I lost my plot there for a second, but
There's so much that you've
yeah,
shared,
there's
so
so
much
much, there's
wisdom,
so much.
and I'm just, like, so grateful that we never stay in a topic from the perspectives that we've already been given. That's what I love about the show and talking with you, Siobhan, because there's so much more nuance and complexities to these experiences that are just thrown out there really as buzzwords to get people to vote a certain way without any acknowledgement of the real lived experience and the many different ways that that can be experienced. And so, like, it just like when you said it's totally your choice, mom, like that just broke me.
Oh,
It broke me to hear that child say that to you, and I just want to affirm like how powerful this story is and your way of sharing it with us in a way that is so holistic in showing us the way that it was impacting you personally, impacting your marriage, impacting you still today, and that it's not just a choice that you make one day and you walk away from, that it's something that will remain with you for the rest of your life, for all of the ways, the good, the bad, the ugly, the most beautiful, the most amazing ways, and just what a catalyst again these moments of that birth can give us, those that are have the opportunity to birth, um that it's such a liminal experience when you tap into that frequency of birthing and creating, that you are really in this it doesn't feel like you're fully planted on earth because you're so tapped into the spiritual while also being very much human and experiencing the day-to-day things that are impacted by that spiritual liminal connection that you are actually bringing um to impact your life materially, and just the processing of that you've had to do and continue to do is what makes your practice and your offering so much more potent. So just
mm,
really honoring this experience that continues to just help you write your story, write your life in the ways that you know you have the power to do so.
thank you. Thank you so much for, yeah, just witnessing and reaffirming that, because I think part of this, like, the choice of the world we wanna live in is, like, a constant, there's, like, temptations at every corner to, like, slip back into that thinking, to slip back into, like, the puritanical, um, and so hearing that really does feel freeing and healing in a lot of ways. I was thinking about the fact, and yeah, like you said, like things don't stop. There's so many layers of it. And I knew that one of my layers was my commitment to showing up for other mothers and people birthing. And in fact, in almost all of my in the opportunities I received to share about my work, I always include this one photo, and I just switched over computers, so I don't think I have it on here. But it's this photo of me holding my client Jessica, and holding her. I have very few photos of me with my clients, just as a doula. It's not it just yeah, if someone documents it, cool, but for this birth, especially with the single parents that I've, worked with, usually it's their partner that's holding them, but in this case, it was me holding Jessica. And I was wearing in this photo, and this is something that I really know, but in that photo, I'm wearing the diaper from still passing my pregnancy. And I remember my mother-in-law was actually in town at that time, and I met them for breakfast after. And I remember like just not being able to like even speak to how much this birth had meant to me. This was a birth where my client was woken up at literally, they were sleeping, their eyes opened, heard it's time, and looked at their phone, and it was 3:33 AM, and the baby was born within a few hours. They called me, I was, like, rushing over, like, one of the most dramatic, um, like, for me, births, because I was like, "Am I gonna make it in time?" I'm calling everybody. I got her 8-year-old child on the phone, like, "All right, grab this, grab that," and then to be able to hold her, and then afterward kind of remember, like, "Okay, I gotta change my pad here, change my Depends because I'm still passing a pregnancy." I think that's just forever gonna stick with me as one of the most, like, now I get to share that, but I remember at the time being like, those kind of moments that like your whole world is shifting, but it's just like Tuesday for everyone around you. That was one of those moments for me, was just feeling, and then again, feeling that connection at dawn. I remember right before I was running late, and not running late, sorry. I was rushing to make it in time, but I still paused because the sun was coming up, and I remember pausing to like take this photo of it and feeling that babe my spirit baby there, and just be like, "You're here. Like this is why." And being there for another baby to be born, that was, yeah, just really feeling her spirit baby through that whole pregnancy. It's just so fascinating. And like you said, like I just want to get into like the complexities of that, because I don't want to ever deny the people who grew up in these puritanical cultures, who fully believe and ride hard for the pro-life stance. I don't want to also deny them the very realness that they feel their spirit babies. A lot of these women that grow up in the church, that are connected to that, and that, to me, it comes back to like our culture's discomfort with death and with endings and with sovereignty, because that's something that I grew in compassion about, actually coming out of that, not for the control. And obviously these ideals are so harmful, are so violent, have hurt so many, broken so many families, even as kids, like as you being an adoptee, like it's so complicated, like like sure, someone could say like, oh well, like they would never grow into this and that. And it's just like, I don't know. I gotta believe that I would have found another way to Earth if if that's what my mom decided. But really, I was growing in understanding and like rage even for the people who do experience this deeply spiritual pregnancy and are told that the only place they can, it's just like telling them the only place they can access that is in the church, telling them that the only way they can access that level of connection is if that baby is born. And it's just such an unreasonable amount of pressure, um, that so many people keep to themselves, that like, don't tell anyone you're pregnant till you make it to 12 weeks thing, like really isolates people. The like abortion topic isolates people. I found out when I shared how many people close to me and my immediate family had had abortions and that have kept it to themselves this whole time, that don't even know that, like, people very, very close to one another, each telling me these things, like this deep, dark secret. And it's just like, it makes me so angry, just like that the sacredness is stolen from us around this because of, yeah, these rules.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I know that in the conversations I've had with you, as well as some other people in my life around abortion, it has just really opened my eyes uh, even more, because I think from my background as an adoptee, that was always the route that people took that conversation with me was, well, aren't you glad that you were born and not aborted? And let me just tell you, y'all, um, just don't say that to adoptees. Like, let's just not bring that up, because it's not productive, and it's harmful, and it's really hurtful all around. So, um, but that was really the direction that people would take that conversation with me, and so I think to broaden that even more.
Manipulative.
Extremely, extremely, and it's like, yeah, and there are plenty of adoptees who would say, "Yeah, I would not choose this. I would not choose this lifetime for me, like this lived experience of being adopted." And that's why abortion is the conversation around abortion for adoptees is such a triggering experience, because we get put in these positions to pick a side. And that's, again, this conversation is so healing for me, because I don't have to pick a side, and I can see that there's truth in all of it. Uh, and also that my stance on anything is, again, returning to this word sovereignty and the value of sovereignty, and honoring that, and knowing that it really comes down to me and what I need in my life, right? And so, yeah, call that pro-choice if you want to, because yeah, it is politically, and also, like you said at the beginning, around pro-choice, typically kind of diluting the creation of a fetus as a clump of cells is also, it doesn't feel like it fully encapsulates the experience for the people that actually have to carry that pregnancy.
Mm. Yeah, I would love to get into now. Okay, so stories of our spirit babies. Thank you. Thank you to the babes. I would love to get into then, like, how do we understand spirit babies? What, like, how do we kind of like see when they enter? Again, knowing that this is all, and I think that's what I want to offer to the conversation. Because someone who I really enjoy, Brown Bruja on Instagram, Rochelle, shared a post recently about their experience working with a lot of clients as a psychic medium, working with people around their spirit babies, and they said some really valuable things that match with my own experience. And I don't hear often people talking about them with the same kind of framework that I do. And so, yeah, I just wanted to get into the more like fun topic of like spirit babies, how they show up, spirit baby readings. And I guess let's start there. Like, what do you think about spirit baby readings?
I personally have never looked for one, even when I knew I was in communication with one, because that was it. That was for me. I was really okay with the communication that was coming from my spirit baby being direct to me and not being translated through somebody. And that also was in relationship to my own understanding of my psychic, intuitive, mediumship abilities. And I was just really open to exploring what that looked like for me. But when I see it online, I'm so interested, because I'm really curious about how people are relating to this spirit baby, and then going out and purchasing a reading from somebody to connect with that even deeper, which I've definitely done for ancestors, people who have passed on for me. But I haven't actually considered going that route to connect with a child baby spirit that I am personally in relationship with already. I feel like for me, it felt too complicated to bring somebody else into the mix when it feels so personal that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think for you, yeah, I think sometimes it's kind of like the spirit baby may be the least, not imp I don't know, I don't wanna rank importance, but, like, it might be the least relevant spirit to connect with in terms of your pregnancy, and that's kind of what I see in that spirit baby world. Because 'cause I've had clients who, they, especially clients who seek out spirit baby reading because they've had a really long journey of trying to conceive, and they really need that hope. They really are looking for that message that there is kind of something coming. But again, knowing like kind of the limitations of material, um, I just wonder how that works when you strongly can feel a spirit baby coming through, the pregnancy just isn't happening. And that's something that I feel like can get so harmful in the conversation of spirit baby mediums. And not knocking anyone who specializes in that, and knowing that some people are just given certain gifts that like really, really are strong. Like there's some people like Nam One, I think, is like really good at connecting with spirit babies. Is I don't know if that's just a me thing, um, but it kind of feels like I wonder how many spirit baby mediums carry that nuance. That's like there could be 10 spirit babies lined up here, but maybe you live on top of a radiation state that you're possibly never going to get pregnant. And what does that look like to continuously say, like, I don't know. It's so complicated. But yeah, that's where I kind of fall on that, is like, when it comes to spirit babies, definitely come through in a lot of my sessions, including with yours. However, when it comes to your pregnancy, you might need to hear from your great great grandmother about finding a new partner, about moving locations, about handling these other things first. That, yeah, I just don't know how productive it is sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I think also just because it is I keep going back to it, nothing is guaranteed with birth. I personally, giving readings, would stay away from giving any sort of
It feels so scary.
information, even if I felt like a message was coming through, because unless it was fully consented in a really personal relationship that I feel like they can trust and know like where I'm coming from. But like a random client that might find me online, I would stay away from, just because of the delicateness of the whole experience. And yeah, like we say on so many readings, like, this is not medical advice, legal advice. This is really for you to take and integrate in the ways that resonate with you. I think it could get really dangerous as a reader
Yeah.
to invite that kind of messaging to come through. So I personally don't see myself getting into that, even though I am very much aware that spirit babies exist from experiencing it myself.
Yeah, and I definitely think what you said needs to be highlighted, that you don't share everything, because again, like discerning, and yeah, just kind of like the desperation sometimes that people who really want to get pregnant can come with. It just feels really irresponsible, um, to share certain things. And this is kind of, I get a similar, well, it's even more serious, but I get a similar kind of feeling with love readings sometimes, where I'm like, ooh, I don't want to even work. Like you're doing that reading for your sister, like no, hearing the message in my head that was like, this is in the bag, this is this and that, and be like, oh, it has to do with like your livelihood, it has to do with your like a lot of things that just feel like way beyond my current confidence as a psychic. um and yeah, like you said, like there's so many. Yeah, I just think it could complicate things so much when it comes to spirit babies. And like literally just thinking about the ways. So I'll share actually what the kind of like continuation of this spirit baby personal experience was earlier this year, when I booked a reading with Ashley. I will share their handle in the show notes, but I was looking for a medium with Caribbean roots, Afro Caribbean roots. And so my intention being that I wanted to connect with my son's ancestors. And in that time, I ended up asking about this spirit baby. And what they told me was really, really affirming. And again, like universe, like understanding expanded as far as how I saw ancestry. Um, one, knowing that when we get pregnant and carry, I forget what month it kind of happens, but when you do birth someone's child, your DNA changes and adapts to some of theirs, and or includes theirs. And that was when I started to have more dreams about my son's ancestors, which for me was very easy to kind of clock because I don't have Black ancestors. So maybe there's other ancestors coming in the dreams that are not Black, but I just can't really separate them as clearly of like, oh, these aren't mine. Like, all these Black people are not, if I'm sitting at a table in the Caribbean, it's not my own ancestry necessarily. But being in that reading, them saying like, again, naming that and being like, yeah, these are his ancestors for the body you're in this lifetime, but don't be mistaken, you're our daughter still. And just kind of like, again, it really is bringing me back to the topic of Kuleana and responsibility. It really helps to orient me spiritually, understanding like what ancestors I came to this life with, bloodline wise, and what responsibility that kind of places me in for this lifetime, while still understanding that I may have had more oppressed or whatever you want to call it identities. It was really healing to hear that, and also to hear this baby come through and say, I am a-okay. And the question I really wanted to know was, if I have another pregnancy, will you be the baby? And them saying no. That was done. That was with this partner. If you meet your next partner, that can open up again. Like a new relationship could open up new things. But that was done and that was closed. And again, I don't want to like, I don't think that's a message for everyone. I know someone who was connecting with the spirit baby and it turned out to be their stepchild who was already living and already existing. And so it's just really expansive as far as like how spirits can enter in. I think some pregnancies that spirit baby's on standby waiting to like hop on board, and I think other pregnancies there may not be any spirit baby when people have abortions. That may have always been written that they're not going to have that. And so maybe if they chose to carry it, others might come into the process. But my understanding spiritually is that during the pregnancy, there is this kind of astral contracting negotiation experience going on, where maybe your other version of yourself or your guides or highest self are kind of negotiating with this spirit of like, all right, what are we talking about in this life here? And that kind of shaping my belief that we consent to some degree around the circumstances of our journeys on earth, separate from we create our circumstances and all of the harm that happens to us, because everyone has their own free will. But I do really, really believe that in terms of like how I understand spirit to move in that pregnancy period.
I love that, because bringing in, again, my conception, there was no thought about it. There was no planning for a pregnancy. There was really no even desire for a pregnancy. And I laugh about it now. I don't mean any disrespect to anyone who has that experience and that has caused any
And to clarify, you're talking about when you were conceived.
My conception, yes.
Yes.
My body coming, or my spirit coming into this body. There was no planning. It was I'll just leave it at that. However, it has that belief, and what you were just sharing really has helped me heal so much, because I do feel spiritually like I consented to this. My human body, my human brain sometimes still gets tripped up on it and is like, dude, why? Why did I choose this? This is really fucking hard. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on here, but it's really hard. And I don't always want to have to walk through the things that I am walking through right now. And then when I really take that moment to sit still, to meditate, to connect spiritually, I'm like, this is my truth. I know that I chose this. I know that I was prepared for this spiritually. I have the ancestors that I need standing by with me, really coaching me, guiding me through all of these different experiences that I've been placed in and circumstances that I have today. And I do believe that as well. So just to affirm and confirm that I totally hear what you're saying in terms of those spiritual astral contracts that are made. That's also my understanding. And that has also been really supportive for me when I am tripping up on some of the more like interpersonal things that are really challenging to walk through when we are doing these healing, intergenerational healing, and specifically adoption healing. There's a lot of questions of why did it have to be this way? When I said, this could have been my life growing up in Hawaii and seeing what my life actually has turned out to be. And again, that affirmation from the land coming through saying, no, your spirit, the conception of this of your life was affirmed and honored here on this land. And so I really do feel like the spirit of both my parents, regardless of their own human actions, they were in agreement to be part of my journey, which is why I believe we've been so connected in the last few years in our reunions and committing to the healing work that we've done, because in the spiritual realms, they said, yeah, okay, I may not be ready right now to raise this child, but I will pop back in when she says it's my time to come back in. And I really feel that in my life. So, and again, that's not every adoptee's story. That's purely my own journey. So you cannot copy paste that experience and assume other adoptees feel the same way. But that understanding has just busted my brain open to be like, wow, there are so many possibilities here on Earth.
Yeah, and we even talked before about how to some degree maybe we knew and liked that we were going to get an additional lineage by being children of me being a daughter of an adoptee, and knowing now like, wow, my dad's adoptive family, like I am so connected to those ancestors, and I'm connected to some of this biological family, not as much that I'm aware of yet, but knowing like, okay, cool, like I have four like lineages who want to support me and my mission and my goals here. It's really empowering to come back to for myself. And I think that's like what the function of a lot of spirituality is like. How can you feel peace with yourself and your own circumstance? We could be, you don't have to believe what we believe, but I do think there's just something to say about like the variety of circumstances that we enter into here on. And I think too that there are people um who have no connection to the parents that they no spiritual connection to the parents that they come forth with. For my own parent healing journey, there was a time where I heard before like, that's not your mother, that's not your so and so. And it's not to negate everything that they've done for me, but it is like to see and zoom out to this greater mothering creator energy that has mothered me, and holding the complexity of my own mother as this kind of like avatar and vessel for my existence. That maybe our contract, and I do believe this with some people, that maybe your contract ends at the moment of conception. And there's a lot of people who are fathered by people they don't know, or who have done harmful things that they don't want to know. And I do 100% believe and support that some people, their contract is just to spark that life onto earth, and maybe their contract was just to keep you fed and housed until you became an adult, and that's it. It's really only something you can discover for yourself and make meaning of yourself, and maybe that meaning will change and grow. But I think like the initiation into motherhood and like the psychic abilities that it opened for me, and maybe for you too, is kind of what allowed this like more nuanced understanding to pour through around like my whole existence in general.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it was that affirmation that, first of all, the spiritual communication that I had been receiving prior was also valid, because I think I was still kind of holding off with using language like I'm a medium, I'm a psychic, which I still don't say a lot just because I don't offer those services technically. But with having that spirit baby come through, it was just very obvious. And, things like, I get a lot of messages through songs, through music, through when I'm walking in nature or meditating in nature. That's where I get a lot of my messages. And just really being aware of where my attention is focused, because I can be, in any sort of environment, and if I'm drawn to a particular message, word, book, I have a sense that, okay, I'm supposed to really pay attention here. And I felt like, in particular, my relationship with my spirit baby was guiding me along this really intense understanding of pregnancy and birth, and was actually helping me start to make those connections between all of the voice work I had been sharing about and the pelvic floor, and how that information really changed my whole outlook on what my birth plan was going to be. And actually, what I felt like the most clear on, in terms of messages from spirit baby, was what kind of birth I wanted and what kind of birth they were also hoping for. And so, of course, there's choice in everything. I could have just decided, oh, well, I think this area that I live in is more conducive to a hospital birth. I'll just choose that. And actually, what I was led to spiritually were people that kept encouraging me to find the right providers that would create the environment that I was hoping for, which was a home birth with a water birth. And it ended up coming through. And that's what I think is just so powerful about these intuitive abilities, is trusting that and going after it, even if you don't see it right around the corner or right in front of you. That spirit can lead you to those people that can provide the environment that you really have in mind. And that can be for anything, right? Not just birthing a baby, but birthing the business. I remember having a vision while I was still pregnant of, actually, it was all soft power nucleus team cooking and singing in the kitchen. And the message was like, those are my aunties. Those are the, not just biological aunties, but these are my aunties that I want to have in my life to nurture and care for me and provide this kind of home family environment for me. And, just knowing that that was part of the plan and how it's continued to evolve so naturally and organically was just, it continues to blow my mind and trip me out, just that we are living these lives.
So trippy. I kind of forgot that you started our doula relationship with going to hospitals for your planning, huh? Yeah, I kind of forgot that you midway through were like, I scheduled with a midwife. I'm gonna start doing this, and me being like, yeah, like hell yeah. Um, and we didn't even get into like the birth realm method and what that meant. But for those who don't know, the birth realm framework and how I approach all these sessions with Kiki really was my understanding of Reiki, leading me to just kind of walk you into these, like, a long guided meditation that would walk you into your birth realm. Sometimes it would feel more guided where I would feel a spirit, and I just kind of channel these things of just like what I'm seeing and narrating like a story. And you having all these different, sometimes you would come in with a specific intention, like I want to cut cords with this energy during this pregnancy, or I want to connect with the baby. But always coming out of it, that is the goal, is to like clear that outside noise, clear your field, so that you can hear, so that you can remember, and you can emerge with that sensation of confidence in what you've experienced, and me just being that mirror to be like, that was real, that was valid, yes, that happened, yes. And kind of keep affirming so that you can make that decision. And I think that's where the birth realm practice really birthed from, which was this understanding that when we're in that space, the things that we experience and see just become so magnificent, so like tangible sometimes, that you just can't deny it for yourself anymore. Like stories clicking from maybe like childhood or a year ago, like all these little things, like why would this person walk in right now? I always say in like psychic stuff, like it's so random, it's got to be real. Like that's kind of how I gauge things. Like that thing was so random, that's got to be real. And that practice you said of kind of like noticing where your attention was is one of the things I tell people who are that I mentor for intuition work. That's one of the first things I say is like, when that happens, what were you thinking about? Where are you feeling it in your body? Like start to notice and note those patterns, because yeah, something's happening there if you can just kind of pick up on it. And I think we all get like tons of spiritual downloads a day, and it's just about that presence to like notice it and be open and curious. And I think that that is even what shaped my like progressed understanding of the pro-life pro-choice false dichotomy, is being present with people's stories, being present with the humanity behind like all of these different circumstances. And yes, I've collected kind of my own like data over time, noticing the patterns and catching what are these things. And that pattern has been the same, that you are loved regardless, that there is an unconditional love that you came to earth on or with, and that you get to co-create your experience. And while there are patterns that we can see through systems like astrology, through things like ancestral work, we can see the patterns of what we are here to navigate. How you navigate that is entirely up to you. If I had chosen in 2021 to birth that child, that lesson of choosing myself above all else would have been delivered in some other form. I do believe that. And I just want to lastly say that, because I have so many clients and so many even family members who still carry this guilt, this feeling of punishment. I've had people come and say, I'm having a hard time getting pregnant. They're in their 30s, and all I can think about is I'm being punished for the abortion I had when I was 17. And the number of people who believe that and have internalized that narrative that you said is driven by capitalist needs, is driven by colonial standards and colonial desperation for producing people above all other, yeah, placing profit over humanity. The fact that people have internalized that into a shame that it says something about themselves, is something that I just feel like that's my hill to die on, the thing I want to disrupt, because we all come here with a baseline of love and divinity, that I think life is just about like the path of remembering that, and then kind of like making do with the materiality of this world. And I think I really only reached that fuller or deeper layer of understanding just in the last few months. That was like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to remember the spirituality. And like we said last week, like that's the baseline. We're here to remember that. And now I feel so much more motivated and empowered about my material life, because I see myself in this larger picture. I see myself with this larger role. And I still have that connection on other timelines. If I wanted to go meditate and spend time with my second baby, I can do that. I could see him in my dreams, and I know in my heart that we're together on other timelines. And this is my timeline to be fully me and in my power here, and deciding what that gets to look like.
Yes. 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 100%. I love you. I'm going to go cry after this, and I
Oh
don't.
my gosh. We both woke up just like, I don't know what the emotions are today, but tears need to be released. I thought it was rage, but rage led to the tears too. So I'm like,
Softening. Mhm.
This is Tapped In, y'all. Stories of unraveling and remembering. Thank you. Dr. Kiki for being my co-navigator on this journey. Thank you, everyone who has showed up to witness and to listen and to see yourselves, hopefully, in some reflection of our stories and what we've shared. If you are connecting with your spirit baby, believe that you are and continue doing that, knowing that they're showing up for you in some way that may be different from all the stories you've been told before. And you can tap in with us every Tuesday here live on YouTube, or afterwards on our YouTube live channel, Spotify channel. Let us know what you think. Let us know if it resonated, if it totally flipped what you see or what you still believe, and you want to tell us we are totally wrong. I want to hear that too. We are here for all the takes. We're here to just share, witness each other, and spread the frequency. So thank you.
Love y'all.